Hello there. Today I'm in Kent, in Appledore, at Gusbourne Estate, tasting some English sparkling wine. And the wine I have here is their Blanc de Blanc. It's a late Disgorged wine from 2013. So just to talk quickly about Gusbourne, the estate was planted in 2004 by somebody called Andrew Weber, whose first career was as a surgeon working in South Africa. Evidently he'd moved to the UK. His daughter was living near here in Kent, and he came down and found this farmland and fell in love with the location, was interested in producing wine, bought 196 hectares of land here and set about planting some vines. Purchase went ahead in 2003, first plantings were in 2004, and over a few years he planted vines up to a stage where he had 20 hectares of vines here. First vintage was made in 2006 and that was released in 2010 to some really good critical acclaim. Since then they've increased the size of the vineyard. Evidently there are 60 hectares of vineyards here in Kent, and also they invested in vineyards in West Sussex near the Gusbourne Estate where they have 30 hectares of vines. In 2013 the ownership of Gusbourne Estate transferred to Lord Michael Ashcroft, a politician, one-time chairman of the UK Conservative Party, who is now the main stakeholder. There are moves in the years ahead to concentrate entirely on making wines coming from the vineyards here in Kent, but in the meantime and for the next few years the wines that are being sold from Gusbourne will continue to include fruit that has come from their vineyards in Sussex. Production here is predominantly sparkling wine. They make a small amount of still wine and volumes vary, but rarely exceed more than about 5 or 6% of the total production in a single year. The wines that are made here are always single vintage wine here, so there's no blending of vintages, there's no use of reserve wine. They only use their own fruit, they don't buy or process fruit from other people, they don't make wines for other people. All the fruit is hand picked and everything is processed on site here in Appledore in Kent. The soils here are a fairly heavy soil, a clay soil, but over sand, and that helps to give both a water reservoir in the clay, but also some drainage to prevent waterlogging. You can see the vineyards behind me here. They start at about 40 metres above sea level and dip down on the hill behind me until they're only a couple of metres above sea level. The coast is about 6 miles in that direction, where you're looking out towards Romney Marsh. So these are gentle south-facing hillsides, and you can possibly see some vegetation moving in the background, which will illustrate the sea breeze that's helping to cool me here on what is a beautiful sunny day. The clay soils tend to give a richness and a ripeness to the wines, and the estate's approach has been to try and emphasise that. The varieties planted here are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, but instead of using clones that have come from Champagne, certainly for the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir, they're using Burgundian clones. Clones that will give slightly lower yield, slightly more concentrated fruit and a richer style. On top of that, they're building a little extra richness with relatively long yeast aging in bottle for some of these wines, and also a portion of the wines that ferment and age in oak barrels. It's worth noting that Gusbourne make a premium cuvee wine called 51 Degrees North that really is quite rich, powerful, concentrated, complex, and has aged for something like 6.5 years on its lees. But anyway, to talk about the late Disgorged Blanc de Blanc. As I say, this is from the 2013 vintage, so this has actually spent 9 years aging on its lees, i.e. with the dead yeast lees after the second fermentation in the bottle, still in contact with the wine in the bottle. And during that period, the yeast will break down and it will impart sugars and proteins into the wine, developing its flavours, feeding it, giving it some richness and helping to fix a really fine bead to ensure a persistent stream of bubbles. Blanc de Blanc, this is 100% Chardonnay. It will be predominantly from the vineyards here in Kent. In 2013 they just gained control of the sites in Sussex and there was one small vineyard planted, so it's possible there may be a small amount of fruit from that vineyard in this blend. A small proportion of the wine fermented and aged in oak, and all of it underwent malolactic conversion. So yet another step to add just a little bit of richness and broadness to what might otherwise be quite a lean and sharp wine. This is a wine with over 10 grams of acidity in it. Therefore also that acidity has been balanced by adding a dosage to give it a residual sugar of 9.5 grams per litre. So let's have a look at it and see what we make of it, shall we? First thing to say is there's actually quite a nice depth. I mean, it's just a medium yellow colour, but somehow there's a vivacity and a depth to it. Looking at it, I can see a very fine bead of bubbles slowly rising from the centre of the glass there. Let's see what I make of the aromas, shall we? Those aromas are a lovely combination of very pure, clean lime flower fruit with notes of more sort of developed wax lime, almost candied peel sort of notes. Perhaps a hint of lemon meringue pie or lemon curd or something like that. I'm slightly surprised. I would have expected slightly more toastiness from the aromas given its 9 years on lees. But let's have a taste. The fine bead really does have a lovely presence on the palate. There's some really good steely acidity there. It's giving a mouth-watering sensation on the sides of my tongue. And there really are some sort of quite zippy, limey notes there, really lifting the whole thing. On the centre of the palate, however, that's where I'm suddenly seeing the yeasty, leesy notes. There are toasty notes, there's touches of brioche, almost a honeyed note, maybe even a hint of honeysuckle. And that steely mineral acidity is giving quite a long finish. There's a hint of salinity along with the minerality. And on the finish, the fruit moves from that lively, limey note to once again showing that sort of toasty, yeasty, brioche sort of style at the back there. It has a lovely long finish. Now, I looked at the Wine Searcher website. There is no aggregated critic score for this particular wine. Personally, I'd score it in the 90s. 93 at least, possibly even a 94. I think this is a really good example of how top quality English sparkling wines really can sit alongside as qualitative equals the best wines that will come from Champagne. The length, the complexity, the individuality of the character of this wine really is very impressive. And while it is not necessarily a cheap wine, as you'd expect, having aged for so long, actually, if you see this wine's price in the context of the price of its peers from Champagne, I think you can only see this as a bargain. I've tasted an awful lot of English sparkling wine recently, and a very large number of them have impressed me greatly. So if you haven't tried top English sparkling wines recently, it might be worth revisiting that. So thank you so much for watching this tasting. If you have enjoyed it, do please press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, it would be fantastic if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be a great help. And if you do that, do please remember to set yourself an alert, and that way you can be notified every time I publish a new tasting. If you have any comments, please do pop those in the comments box below. I'd love to hear your feedback about the wines I'm looking at, your experience of English sparkling wines, or anything else to do with the tasting. It would be great to hear from you about that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the tasting, I would much appreciate it if you passed it on to them. I'd be very grateful. So thank you once again for watching, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. Until then,